Right, so with all of the conflict going on in the Middle East right now, with the Gaza ceasefire looking to be at imminent risk of collapse, Lebanon's ceasefire already having ended, Israeli aggression in the West Bank, the threat of the population of Gaza being displaced into Egypt and Jordan, Israel having basically started a war now with Syria, and the people of Syria taking matters into their own hands in that regard. Still, little sign of action from their new President Al Sharaa. The thought of Israel starting yet another war on yet another front seems ludicrous and utterly insane. But then with people like Benjamin Netanyahu in charge, along with madmen in his government like Bezalel, Smotrich and Israel Katz, it's not going to be much of a surprise, is it? And yet we now have the spectre of Israel firing once again on Iran, this time attacking the very nuclear sites they were talked out of striking previously. Iran has still not responded following the last attack made against Israel at the end of October last year. The threat of their Operation True Promise 3 very much left hanging in the air still at the moment. Therefore, for Israel to attack again, much as we've seen in Syria, would be seen as a blatantly unprovoked attack should it come to pass. And Iran are very unlikely to hold back, in which case. But would that result in Israel getting their wish and seeing the US get involved? And if it does, with the armaments Iran is rumoured to have that they've not yet unveiled, at what cost for Israel could that ultimately come at? Right, so Iran are not messing around with the nonsense Israel are spitting in their direction, it seems, and if any Middle Eastern nation might have the ability to back up their rhetoric in a way that makes Israel shake, it's probably going to be Iran. Iran has issued stark warnings of major repercussions should Israel attack its nuclear sites, as they've been threatening to do now for some time, because they don't have enough conflict on their hands already, it seems. It is a threat that comes amid growing concerns that Israel, growing more and more emboldened by their ongoing destabilization of the Middle East in all manner of states now, and largely getting away with it, is now preparing to strike Iran's nuclear facilities. Such an attack would not only escalate hostilities between the two nations, but would likely draw the United States into the conflict at that point, a fight with Iran biting off more than Israel can chew. And whilst neither Biden before nor Trump now have shown any sign of being particularly keen on the idea of going to war against Iran, if Netanyahu thinks he can force it, guaranteed to come to his rescue as the US might be, seems to be, who doubt them, he might just go there regardless. Therefore, Iran's fears are not unfounded. Israel has a history of targeting its neighbours under the guise of national security. A buffer zone in Gaza, a buffer zone in Lebanon, and now a buffer zone in Syria. And they just keep getting bigger and bigger, these buffer zones. Just can't imagine why that is, can you? Anyway, Israel's actions in the Middle East have long been a source of regional instability, not just since October 7th, 2023. It's been a significant period since then, however, nonetheless. From its occupation of Palestinian territories to its repeated incursions into Lebanon and Syria, Israel has consistently pursued policies that undermine peace and security in the region. Its recent targeting of Iran, apart from being unfathomably stupid, is all part of a broader strategy to assert dominance and eliminate perceived threats by attempting to drag allies into a much wider war, keep providing them with even more and more armaments. All of this is at the heart of it, just a move after move by Netanyahu to ensure he ultimately stays in power, because ultimately that is what everything Israel does these days boils down to. However, this strategy is deeply flawed when you get to Iran. Palestine is under occupation. It is the ultimate act of punching down, attacking them as Israel have been. Lebanon, Israel has invaded several times in its history. The actions of Israel in both these states saw the formation, of course, of both Hamas and Hezbollah, both monsters of Israel's making, if you like. But it has had the opposite effect of securing Israel ultimately. But by provoking Iran, you're taking on a much more powerful entity. You're taking that destabilization to a point of insecurity on steroids, because Israel risks triggering a conflict that it could not possibly counter. And then you just get the feeling they're betting on that. So the entire Middle East could rapidly deteriorate from that point on. Israel's justification for targeting Iran's nuclear sites is rooted in its claim that Iran poses an existential threat and is developing nuclear weapons. While Iran's nuclear program is a contentious issue, there's no evidence to suggest that Iran is developing nuclear weapons. There is a fatwa in place in that country that forbids it, and despite attempts by the Iranian military recently to have that overturned, it has not thus far happened, at least not that we're aware of. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, has repeatedly confirmed that Iran's nuclear activities are consistent with the peaceful purposes they are saying they are for. Israel's insistence on framing Iran as a nuclear threat is a deliberate attempt to justify its aggressive policies and draw the United States into its conflicts. However, you do get the feeling Iran are winding the West up in some degree or other, because they have been enriching uranium beyond the point needed for their power station ideas, but not so far as to be able to create nuclear weapons. But the fact they keep doing it, I don't think it helps their case very much. Anyway, as such, Iran has placed its missile defences on high alert amid fears of this Israeli attack. This move reflects Iran's growing concern that Israel is preparing to strike these nuclear facilities anyway, regardless of how mad an idea it would be. Such an attack would be a blatant violation of international law. It would be a dangerous escalation of hostilities, not to mention the fact targeting nuclear facilities is the height of absolute stupidity for all of the obvious reasons. It would also completely undermine efforts to resolve the nuclear issue with Iran through diplomacy regarding international oversight of that nuclear research program. Iran's made it clear that it will not tolerate an attack on its nuclear sites. Nobody would really, would they? It's amazing that it counts as news that Iran take the same stance really that any other country with nuclear power would. But there we are. The country's leadership has vowed to retaliate with full force should Israel dare to strike them, and we know this promise of retaliation is not an empty threat because we've seen Iran retaliate against Israel twice already in attacks many feel they held back in. Iran possesses a formidable military capability. They've been showcasing some of it of late, including advanced missile systems, drones and jets. An Israeli attack on Iran's nuclear facilities would therefore likely trigger a far more significant response than we've seen previously, with all of the far-reaching consequences I've already alluded to. But Iran's resolve to retaliate is further underscored by its ongoing grievances over those previous attacks by Israel. On top of placing missile systems on high alert, Iran have also been deploying additional measures in light of the threat from Israel, and these include the deployment of additional air defense systems, the reinforcement of physical barriers, and the implementation of advanced surveillance technologies. Iran's efforts to protect its nuclear sites reflect its determination to deter an Israeli attack and safeguard its sovereignty, whilst doing its utmost to protect targets that nobody in their right mind should ever think of targeting, given the potential fallout of such attacks. Therefore, no matter what Iran put in place, these defensive measures also underscore the precariousness of the situation, the fear on Iran's part. But underpinning this further are Iran's fears concerning the close alliance between the United States and Israel and how that could play out should Israel attack their nuclear sites. This has long been a source of concern not just for Iran but globally, and recent developments have only heightened these fears. US intelligence agencies have themselves been warning that a potential Israeli strike on Iran, raising the spectre of American involvement should Iran seek to defend themselves, because as we all know by now when it comes to the Middle East, only Israel has the right to defend itself, it seems. US involvement would not only escalate the conflict, but also strain America's relations with other nations in the Middle East as a result, and deservedly so. Other nations who have their own concerns about Israel would likely view US involvement as a further destabilizing factor, not helping it, not helping the situation out there, but very much hindering it, and which it obviously would be as one-sided as the US are. Therefore, the warnings Iran has issued ought to be heeded not just by Israel, but by everyone. The consequences of an Israeli attack on Iran nuclear sites would be catastrophic. For Israel, such an attack would likely trigger a devastating response from Iran, including missile strikes and attacks by their allies, their proxies as they get called so often. But where do you escalate to from there? Because this has been Israel's game for so long. It's escalation after escalation. The resulting conflict could quickly spiral way out of control, draw in other nations from outside, and destabilize the entire Middle East and possibly beyond even that. For Iran, an attack on its nuclear facilities would be a severe blow to its sovereignty and security. It would also undermine the country's efforts to develop a nuclear program that they insist is for peaceful purposes. The destruction of Iran's nuclear infrastructure would likely provoke a strong nationalist response, further entrenching the regime and complicating efforts for the outside world to engage with Iran diplomatically in order to calm matters down again. And that's assuming other nations finally decide Israel must be taken to task and sanctioned for all its atrocities. All of them. Because sanctions only ever seem to get applied to Iran, and you can quite conceivably see it happening again here. So in light of the potentially catastrophic consequences of an Israeli attack on Iran, it is imperative that diplomatic solutions be pursued. The international community, particularly the United Nations, they must pull their fingers out of their backsides here and play a proactive role in de-escalating tensions. Israel are the ones making the threats here. be clear about that. If they launch an attack on Iran, that would have been an unprovoked attack. That needs to be made clear too. And it would be the failure of the likes of the UN sitting on their hands and not dealing with them before they strike if all of that comes to pass. Israel have caused enough harm. The UN Security Council can be bypassed by the full council. There is a way around it. I've spoken about it in previous videos. It's time things were taken out of the control of that US veto. Efforts to resolve the nuclear issue where Iran is concerned must also be reinvigorated. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, which is commonly known as the Iran Nuclear Deal, provides a framework for addressing Iran's nuclear program through diplomacy, and it's been working of late. It's been successful of late. That has faced challenges, yes, but things have been moving forward, and it still remains the best option for monitoring Iran and reducing the risk of conflict. The United States and other signatories must work to revive the JCPOA properly and ensure its full implementation at the same time as dealing with Israel and its threats. The escalating tensions between Iran and Israel are a stark reminder of the fragility of peace in the Middle East, Israel's aggressive policies and Iran's nuclear program. Their word, their reports should carry more weight than Netanyahu jumping up and down and crying that Iran have nuclear weapons. We should actually be asking Israel about the nuclear weapons they apparently have, because we don't know much about them either. All in all, this would be another false flag attack by Israel. It would fall under that banner, I think. And we know they quite like them, given the false flag operation they've been carrying out in Syria too. Now looking more and more like it is a de facto war, with just one side doing the attacking currently. But how long can that last for? And if proven, could it mark the end for Netanyahu and his exposure as a warmongering madman? There's a thought. Get all the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe before you do so though, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as supporting the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated. And I will hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers folks.